My son used to call me every single day until she came into his life. My name is Isabel. I'm 44 years old, and this is the story of how I went from being my son's whole world to barely being a footnote in his new one. I raised Ethan on my own. His father was gone before Ethan even had a name. I was 22, scared, broke, and doing night shifts at a diner in Charlotte just to keep us fed. The nights were long, and I barely had time to rest between work and diapers. But those quiet early mornings when Ethan would curl up next to me in our tiny bed, they made it all worth it. He was my little shadow. We did everything together, grocery runs, late-night pancake dinners, even laundry at that awful coin laundromat that smelled like metal and mildew. Once, when he was about 9, he told me I was his favorite person in the whole universe. I cried that night. I still remember the way he pronounced universe, like universe. I didn't have much in life, but I had Ethan. And for a long time, it felt like enough. When he went off to college, I braced myself for the distance. But he still called me almost every day. We'd talk about his classes, his weird professors, his favorite sandwich from the campus deli. I lived for those calls. I even kept a notebook of the little things he said, just so I wouldn't forget. Silly, I know. Then, Madison entered the picture. They met during his senior year, in some creative writing seminar. I remember the first time he mentioned her. He said she was sharp and magnetic. I laughed and teased him, asking if he was already in love. Maybe, he'd said. She's different, Mom. When he brought her home for the first time, I was nervous. I wore my nicest blouse, lit a vanilla-scented candle I'd been saving, and cooked his favorite baked ziti. Madison was polite, but cold. She barely made eye contact. Complimented the food without taking a second bite. She smiled, sure, but never really with her eyes. Still, I tried to be kind. I asked her questions, tried to connect. But it felt one-sided. Like she was tolerating me rather than meeting me. And slowly, things began to change. Ethan's calls started to dwindle. From daily to weekly. Then to nothing at all. At first, I blamed his workload. New job, new city, new responsibilities. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about any of that. It was about her. About Madison. She had a way of pulling him into her orbit and locking everyone else out. I once left him a voicemail after 2 weeks of silence. My voice cracked when I said, "I miss you." He never called back. Have you ever felt that kind of quiet? The kind that isn't just silence, but a complete absence of love? Because that's what it started to feel like. Like I'd been quietly erased. The first time I really felt it, that shift, I was at the grocery store, aisle 5, trying to decide between jasmine and basmati rice. My phone buzzed. I remember the moment because I dropped the bag of rice. My heart leapt thinking it was Ethan. But it was just a coupon app notification. God, that feeling of disappointment hit harder than it should have. I called him again that night. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message this time. I just stared at the ceiling fan in my bedroom, letting it spin and spin, pretending my thoughts weren't spiraling just as fast. A week later, I finally got a text. Just a simple, "Hey, sorry, been busy. Hope you're well." That was it. I stared at the screen for a long time. Hope you're well? That's the kind of thing you say to an old coworker, not your mother. Something had changed. No, someone had changed him. The next time I saw Ethan was Thanksgiving. He and Madison came down, stayed at a hotel. That stung. We had a perfectly good guest room, the same one he grew up in. But Madison needed her space, apparently. Dinner was stiff. I made everything from scratch, stuffing, mashed potatoes, roasted carrots with thyme, even his favorite pumpkin pie. Madison barely touched anything. Said she was vegan now. Ethan didn't even look at the pie. They left early. No goodbye hug. Just a quick wave and a thank you that sounded more like an obligation than appreciation. After they left, I sat at the table surrounded by full plates and silence. I remember picking up his fork, it still had gravy on it, and just staring at it like it might tell me where my son had gone. I asked myself over and over, what did I do wrong? Was I too much? Not enough? Did I say something that pushed him away? I even started to question my parenting. Was I overbearing? Did I rely on him too much emotionally? But then something happened that made everything worse. I posted an old picture of us, Ethan at age 6, missing his 2 front teeth, hugging me after a school play. It was a hashtag Throwback Thursday kind of thing. I wrote, "Miss these moments." Time flies. No likes from Ethan. No comment. But later that night, I got a message from Madison. A private message. It read, "Please stop guilt-tripping Ethan online. It's manipulative and unfair. Let him live his life." I felt my stomach drop. Like I'd been slapped. That picture wasn't about guilt. It was about love. About remembering a time when I mattered. When he still looked at me like I was his whole world. Do you think I was out of line? Was I clinging too hard to something that was already gone? Because in that moment, I wasn't even sure who I was anymore, except someone who had clearly overstayed her welcome in her own child's life. I didn't reply to Madison's message. I mean, what would I have even said? "I'm sorry for loving my son too much? I'll just sit quietly in the background of his life like a piece of old furniture?" No. I didn't reply. I just closed my laptop, went into the kitchen, and started scrubbing the already clean countertop. It's what I do when I feel out of control clean. Like maybe if the sink sparkles, the rest of my life will, too. The days after that were a strange mix of silence and overthinking. I didn't post anything else online. I didn't call. I didn't text. I told myself I was giving him space, but let's be honest, I was scared. Scared he wouldn't reply. Scared he would. One afternoon, I saw my neighbor Cheryl outside. She's the kind of woman who knows everything about everyone within a 3-mile radius. She waved me over and said, "Hey, I saw your Ethan at Whole Foods the other day with that girl of his. She's intense, huh?" I nodded. "Yeah, she is." She looked like she was lecturing him. Poor boy barely got a word in. That sat with me, like a stone in my chest. Later that week, I couldn't help myself. I went back to Ethan's old room. It still had the faded superhero posters on the walls, the bookshelf with Goosebumps novels and broken Lego sets. I sat on his bed and stared at the dent in the carpet where his desk chair used to be. I whispered, "Where did you go, baby?" And then, this part hurts, I opened my laptop and typed his name into Google. Just curiosity, right? But there it was, his LinkedIn profile. And I saw something I wasn't expecting. He'd moved jobs. New title, new company. Big step up. And I had no idea. I wasn't angry. I was left out. Shut out. Not long after, I got a call from my sister. She said, "Have you talked to Ethan lately?" I told her no. "Well," she said hesitantly, "he and Madison just announced their engagement. On Instagram. Big photo shoot. It's all over her page." My breath caught. Not because they got engaged, I expected that. But because I hadn't even heard it from him. No call. No text. Not even a, "Hey, guess what?" I went to Madison's Instagram. There it was. A picture of them on a beach, her hand outstretched, ring sparkling like it was shouting, "Look what I've won." And the caption? "Found my forever. Ring grateful for those who truly support us and only them. Only them." I stared at that phrase for so long, the words started to blur. Only them. As if everyone else, me, was the enemy. An outsider. Tell me something. Have you ever looked at someone you love, someone you raised, and thought, "You don't see me anymore, do you?" Because that night, I sat in the dark and asked myself, what do I do when my own son starts treating me like I'm a threat to his happiness? I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo, Ethan smiling, Madison glowing, the ocean behind them looking like something out of a travel ad. It should have made me happy. It should have made me proud. But instead, it made me feel like I was standing outside a house I used to live in, peeking through the windows. The next morning, I made myself a cup of coffee, too strong, the way I like it when I'm tired and angry, and I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from the mug. I didn't even realize I was crying until a tear hit the rim. I decided I wasn't going to reach out anymore. No texts, no calls. No more commenting on his posts or liking Madison's filtered photos of Sunday brunch. I'd given enough. Maybe too much. So I started focusing on myself. I joined a book club at the local library. Just 5 women, all over 40, sitting in folding chairs and talking about characters like they were real people. I started taking long walks at the park. I even painted the guest room, Ethan's old room, a soft green. It felt symbolic, I guess. Like planting something new. But healing isn't linear. Some days were fine. Others, I found myself picking up my phone, fingers hovering over his name, hoping he'd just remember me. Then a letter came in the mail. A real letter, not a bill or a catalog. It was from Ethan. My hands were trembling before I even opened the envelope. It was short. Mom, I know things have been distant between us. I've been trying to find my own way, and maybe I've handled things poorly. Madison and I are planning a small wedding in the spring. We'd like to invite you, if you're willing. No apology. No warmth. Just an invitation. I stared at that letter for hours. At first, I was hopeful. Maybe this was a turning point. Maybe we'd finally talk. But the more I read it, the more I realized it wasn't about me. It was about keeping the peace. About appearances. About doing the right thing on paper. Still, I said yes. Not because I forgave everything, but because I wanted to see him. I missed his voice. His laugh. Even if it was just for one day. But I wasn't prepared for what would happen next. The wedding was beautiful, I guess. White roses, fairy lights, soft piano music. Madison looked like a magazine cover. Ethan looked nervous. I sat in the second row because, apparently, the first was for immediate family only. That stung. During the reception, I tried to talk to him. I reached for his arm and said, "Ethan, can we talk? Just for a second." He looked around, visibly uncomfortable. "I can't right now, Mom. Madison's watching." That's when I realized. It wasn't just distance. It was control. She wasn't just intense. She had drawn a line around him, and I was firmly on the outside. I didn't leave the reception early, though God knows I wanted to. I stayed, sipping watered-down champagne, pretending I didn't see the sideways glances or hear the polite but distant "Hi, nice to meet you" from Madison's family. No one asked how I was. No one asked if I needed anything. I just smiled. That's what mothers are supposed to do at their son's wedding, right? Smile, nod, fade into the background. But that night, when I got home and kicked off my shoes, my feet were blistered from heels I hadn't worn in years, I let out a sob I didn't even know I'd been holding. It just poured out. I dropped to the floor right there in the hallway. God, I felt pathetic. But it wasn't just about Ethan. It was about giving everything to someone, your time, your energy, your love, and watching them walk away without so much as a glance back. The next morning, I called my sister, Claire. She's the no-nonsense type, blunt to the point of rude, but her honesty has always been a weird kind of comfort. When I told her everything, she didn't try to sugarcoat it. "Honey, it sounds like he's being manipulated." "By Madison?" I asked. Claire snorted. "No, by his own guilt. He doesn't know how to navigate being a man and a husband and a son all at once, so he's choosing the one that yells the loudest." That hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd never wanted Ethan to choose. I just wanted to still matter. So I wrote him a letter. Not a text. Not an email. A handwritten letter, just like he sent me. It took me 3 days. I rewrote it a dozen times, tore up pages, cried, rewrote again. I tried to keep it honest, without sounding bitter. Loving, without sounding desperate. It wasn't easy. I told him about how I felt sitting in the second row. How much it hurt to be on the outside of his life. I reminded him of when he was 6 and had the flu, and I slept on the floor by his bed all night just to keep the cool rag on his forehead. I told him I missed him. And I told him I wasn't giving up on him. But I was done begging for space in his life. I mailed it without expectations. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. Nothing. And just when I started to wonder if maybe he'd tossed it without reading, he showed up at my door. It was a Tuesday. I still had my bathrobe on. Hair half-pinned. I was in the middle of making soup. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes red. "Can I come in?" he asked. I nodded, but my heart was pounding. He stepped inside, looked around like he was searching for memories in the furniture, then turned to me and said, "I read your letter." Twice. Silence. Then, you're right. I've been distant. Cowardly, maybe. I don't know. Madison and I, things aren't as perfect as they look. And I miss you, Mom. I really do. It wasn't everything I wanted to hear, but it was a start. We sat at the kitchen table like we used to. Only this time, there was a wall between us that years of silence had built. He stirred his tea absent-mindedly, not even adding sugar, the same way I used to make it when he was a teenager and pretending he was too grown up for sweetness. Funny how some things never change. I'm sorry, he said again. I should have stood up for you more. Especially with Madison. I didn't know what to say to that. A part of me had been aching to hear those words, but now that they were in the air, they felt too fragile, like they'd blow away if I breathed wrong. He continued, She felt threatened, I guess. You and I are close. We always have been. And I didn't know how to make space for both of you without upsetting one of you. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in what felt like years. He looked tired. Older. Like the boy I raised was still in there somewhere, trying to be a man everyone expected him to be. A husband. A provider. A son. But not once did he say he missed being himself. I touched his hand. Ethan, I never wanted you to pick sides. I just wanted you to not forget who helped build you. He nodded slowly, staring into his tea like it held answers he couldn't quite read. Then he said something I'll never forget. Sometimes. I get so caught up in trying to be everything for everyone, I forget who I am. God, that broke me. Because how many of us do that? How many women, mothers, daughters, wives, give and give until there's nothing left? Until we're ghosts in our own homes? I sat back and whispered, I think I did that too. I spent so many years being your mom, I forgot what I liked. Who I was outside of that. He smiled sadly. Maybe we can figure that out together. And for the first time in forever, we just sat. No drama. No accusations. Just a quiet between us that felt almost like healing. Later that night, after he left, I sat on the couch in the dark, holding the mug he used. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. But I have to ask, have you ever given so much to someone that you forgot how to be yourself? Really think about that. Because I think a lot of us, we confuse love with sacrifice. And maybe it's time we stop bleeding for people who won't even hand us a band-aid. You'd think that after all the screaming, the betrayal, and the chaos, the silence would be comforting. But it wasn't. It was a kind of silence that buzzed in my ears, like static. Like something unfinished. I'd sit on the edge of the bed and stare at the wall, coffee in hand, burnt, lukewarm, always halfway drunk, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. No Madison. No Ethan. Just me. That week, I started rearranging furniture. It was silly, really. I moved the couch 3 times in one afternoon. Took down photos of the 3 of us, ones where we were smiling with our eyes closed, and shoved them in a drawer I never open. I even bought myself a new pillow from Target. A stupid little act of rebellion, but it felt necessary. Then, out of nowhere, Ethan called. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I just burnt the grilled cheese and nearly set off the smoke detector. I saw his name flash on my phone and froze. My heart was pounding. I was sure he wanted to yell. Or worse, say nothing at all. But when I answered, his voice was small. Hey Mom, do you have a minute? We met at Miller's, the cafe near the park. The one with terrible cappuccinos, but great biscotti. He looked thinner. Eyes darker. Nervous fingers wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug. I didn't know whether to hug him or slap him. But I just sat down. I'm sorry, he whispered, eyes glued to his cup. I shouldn't have let her talk to you like that. Or treat you like that. He didn't cry. But I could see it, just under the surface. She didn't like that I talked to you. Said I needed to cut the cord. Said a real man doesn't run to his mother every time he has a problem. He laughed bitterly. She made me feel like a little boy just for loving you. That shattered me. Not because of Madison, but because my son had been made to feel ashamed of his heart. He said, when she told me she was pregnant, I thought, maybe things would get better. But she lied. She was never pregnant. She just wanted to trap me. I couldn't speak. I just reached across the table and held his hand. For a long time, we sat there, just breathing, just existing. Then he said, "Can I come home?" Just for a little while. My throat closed up. I nodded. That night, he came over for dinner. I made spaghetti like old times. He even asked if I still made garlic bread with too much butter. We laughed. Like really laughed. And when he said, "Thanks, Mom," I almost cried into my wine. Maybe he'd been lost. But now he was trying to come home. It's been nearly 7 months since Ethan moved out of Madison's apartment and came back home. I say home, but it's different now. The same couch, the same cracked mug I still drink my morning coffee from, but everything feels calmer. There's no more tension clinging to the walls, no more waiting for a phone call that never comes, no more pretending everything's fine when it's not. Ethan sleeps in the guest room now by choice. He says it gives him time to think and breathe. I respect that. Sometimes I catch him sitting in the backyard with his headphones on, scribbling into a notebook. He won't let me read what he's writing. Not yet. But I smile, because he's doing something for himself. That's new. That's growth. We've been to therapy together, once a week, like clockwork. At first, it was awkward. We danced around the truth, throwing polite words at each other like band-aids. But one session, Ethan finally said it out loud. "Mom, I didn't believe you because it was easier not to." That shattered something inside me, but not in the way you'd think. It wasn't pain. It was release. I realized I'd been carrying around this desperate need to be believed. And the moment he said that, acknowledged it, I felt my body exhale for the first time in years. Madison never tried to contact him again. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. I used to dream of closure. Of hearing her say, "I'm sorry for what I did to you." But now? I don't need it. The closure didn't come from her, it came from me. I took back my peace. I took back my voice. Last week, I was cleaning out the hallway closet and found the birthday card Ethan made me when he was 10. It had crooked letters and too much glitter, and it said, "You're my hero." I cried. Not because I missed who he was, but because I think, just maybe, we're finding our way back to that bond. Slowly. Carefully. Honestly. These days, I spend my mornings journaling. Not for anyone else, just me. I write down the little things. What I made for dinner. What the sky looked like at 6 a.m., how Ethan laughed at a dumb joke I made about TikTok. They're small, quiet things. But they're real. And real is enough. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that sometimes love means letting someone fall and being there when they finally look up. Sometimes strength looks like silence. Sometimes healing sounds like, "I forgive you." And sometimes, a mother's love isn't loud or perfect, it's just unbreakable. If you've walked through your own storms and came out stronger, or if you're still fighting, you're not alone. Subscribe to hear more stories from women like us, women who refuse to stay down.